Thank you for that welcome. I'm Stan Grant. Also tonight, the rise of fake news and conspiracy theories, but is truth starting to prevail? Well, here to give you some answers, Deputy Leader of the Nationals, Perin Davey, Assistant Treasurer and Minister for Financial Services, Stephen Jones, Advisor at the Centre for Public Christianity, Tim Costello, Iranian-born journalist and scholar Saba Vasefi, and in Melbourne, the woman whose life story has been immortalised on screen, Erin Brockovich. Please make them all feel welcome.
Given the extreme situation in Iran, inhuman brutality by the regime, and breach of human rights and humanity in every level, many Western countries, including UK, Canada, and America, announced travel bans and asset freeze on brutal regime associates. I'm just wondering, I'd like to ask, what is the strong actions that Australian government and other countries can provide to support Iranian people and stop the bloodshed in Iran?
Stephen.
First, I want to say thank you, and to you and your countrymen, your brothers and sisters back in Iran. They have our strength and support, and I can't imagine how difficult it is for you to be here in Australia, seeing what's going on back home and having family involved. You deserve our solidarity and support, and you have that. We condemn the actions. I think it's important for a country like Australia to be acting multilaterally with all the countries around the world who share our values, and expressing to Iran in the strongest of terms that we abhor what is going on, and working through the multilateral fora to work at what other pressure can be placed upon the leadership and the government in Iran to recognise and treat the women in particular in Iran with the dignity and respect that they deserve. I think it's important, though, for a government like Australia, for a country like Australia, that we're working multilaterally with all of the other countries which share our values.
Perin?
Yeah, look, I do agree with Stephen in this case. It's terrible what is going on over there. And one thing we also must make sure that when we make any decisions about how we respond and react is that we don't inadvertently make decisions that have a negative impact on the innocent civilians. And we don't want to make their lives worse for any of the women in Iran. So we don't want to necessarily arbitrarily ban travel or put sanctions on that will make it impossible for those people to maybe get out and get to safety. So I agree, we've got to do it through diplomatic channels first and foremost, but also completely condone what the government has done in speaking up against what is happening over there.
Is that the answer you want, Arazu, or do you want to see more? Is there more?
I want to see more, specific actions. What's exactly the government of Australia is just, if they have made any decision, if they consider what's the solution, what we can do, because we don't want they just take the national assets. They are, those are assets of people. They belongs to the people, and they just invest in Western country, and they just made a, safe haven, for themselves in here.
So you would like to see bans on these assets?
Yeah, of course.
And real economic sanctions against Iran. Stephen, why not?
I think there's a whole range of things that we consider as we see the situation unfold in Iran. There has been some suggestion that we should withdraw our diplomatic representations in the country and impose travel bans. I think now in particular, it is important that we have people in country who are able to provide us with reliable information about what's going on there. So, and our embassy and our diplomatic staff are an important source of that unbiased information. So for that reason, I don't support at this stage us withdrawing our staff. And for the same reason, we want Western journalists to be able to travel to Iran to be able to report honestly with what's going on there as well.
Tim, is that enough from where you sit, or do you think that there is more pressure that Australia can bring to bear specifically?
Well, now we've signed the Maginski Act. Targeted sanctions should be happening straight away. I think we should certainly be looking at economic sanctions. That may not scare Iran, but actually with others, if that happens, I think there is this ripple effect, because with women risking their lives, including Saba's mother, in protests, I think that's our fundamental commitment now. And I would say, having been to Manus Island and seen Iranians who were in detention, who could never go back, languishing purposelessly and suffering at the hands of our government, I think this must never happen again, and we must be empathetic for anyone fleeing from this sort of persecution.
Reza, you spent time in detention, didn't you? And
Yes.
Christmas Island. What was that like for you?
It wasn't good experience, obviously. I spent 2 years of my life in detention center in Christmas Island with my 1-year-old son, being detained for really not good reason. We came to Australia as, asylum seeker to live free life in here. I was hoping if I didn't have much right as a woman in my country, I can come to one of the Western country and I can be considered as a human. But unfortunately, what we experience in here, and still we are experiencing, it's now 10 years we are in Australia, we are still living in limbo. We have no right to study, we have no right to travel, we have no right to buy any assets in Australia, and I have 2 Australian-born children. They still doesn't have any nationality. And these are, I think, these are something nobody wants to experience in his or her life.
No, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear that. And Sarah Bakshi is here as well. Sarah? Yeah, you share a similar situation to Arezu, don't you, in your experience in coming to Australia?
Yes, I came here on student visa, but I've had so many similar experiences as the women in Iran. They are what they're taking now. I've been in their place. Can I just stand up for a second?
Yes, you can.
So I just want people to see where I look now. I can get killed for where I look in my country. I don't think there is anything wrong in my appearance.
In not wearing
Yeah.
a headscarf.
Yeah. So I've had so many bad experiences. I have been in police custody a few times for the reasons that I think that's definitely not crime. The first time I was in police custody, I was 12. It was when I was in my cousin's car, going to a supermarket for essential shopping, and he's older than me, so he was driving me there. And he was a boy, of course, so the morality police pulled over the car and they asked us question, what's the relation between me and my cousin? And because we said we are cousin and we don't have any marriage certificate, because obviously in Iran, girls and boys, they cannot be out on the street if they're not married officially with a marriage certificate. So they took me to police custody. They kicked me. I'm sorry, I'm not here to cry because I want to share my experience so people can hear me. So that was the first experience I had. There was a lot of process for me to be able to come out. So my parents came and they explained the situation. They said we've got the permission for her to be out on the street with his cousin. So they kicked my dad out. They said you're not allowed to have your girl on the street with her cousin because this is against Islamic rule. So anyway, that was the first time. Second time, third time, I've been kicked out because I had nail polish on my toes and I had tongue walking on the street. I was kicked out of uni class because I had my scarves back and my hair was out, so I wasn't be able to study for a term, like for a semester in my uni back home. So last time I left country was 2016 when I was coming out of the airport, like police custody check. They asked me different questions. They asked me like, where do I go and why do I go and why did I come? So this sort of questions. And I told them that I'm a student, I'm going back to study. They asked me like a lot of personal questions. Where do I live in Australia? And if I do have a boyfriend, and if I'm around with any boys.
Even those personal questions?
Yes. So when I stopped answering, I said they're too personal. I don't understand why you are asking me these questions. And they took my passport. They said, you need to answer the questions if you don't want to miss your flight. So I keep answering, and they keep asking me a lot of things, like what do I involved in Australia, if I'm doing anything against Islamic Republic of Iran. So when I started answering, the question was getting more and more. So I could hear the speakers, they calling my name because I was missing my flight, and they started laughing. They said, you need to sign 12 paper of commitment that you're not committing any crime against Islamic regime if you don't want to miss your flight. So they took me to a freaking dark room, it was really scary. So they asked me a lot of questions, with a lot of lights. I don't know, I'm asking a lot of friends, and they haven't experienced this in airport. So maybe I'm one of the many that I experienced in the airport. So I had to fingerprint all those 12 papers and sign the papers that I'm not doing anything against Islamic Republic of Iran. And then when I was going through the passport check, they gave my passport in the last minute, but the flight was already given my suitcase back. So when I went through second, because there is few police custody check in airport, when I was going through the second one, they wanted to check my body if I've got anything in my body, because they are already doubting me in the first police custody. I had no problem. I had no political background. I had no history. I don't know what was happening. So that was the last experience I had. It was, I rather not explain the end. It wasn't really nice, but I missed my flight. I missed my flight, yeah.
And I'll come back to Saba on this. We've been listening to these stories, and I'm so sorry to hear what happened to you and what we see happening in Iran right now. And you listen to the response that we've had from politicians tonight. Is it enough?
No. For a long time, since Islamic Republic seized the power, they are taking hostage. And the West is capitulating to the terrorist demands. And, my request from the West, and especially Australian government, is to delegitimize Islamic Republic as a legitimate government, disparage them, reduce them to a terrorist group, not... I give you some evidences. For example, it is the latest news, it's very current. Asadullah Assadi in Belgium court, he was sentenced to 20 years jail for plotting to bomb opposition rally in Paris. Hamid Nouri in Swedish court was sentenced to life in jail for leading execution of the political prisoner in 1988, I think. They are all diplomats. Asadullah Assadi was a diplomat in Europe, Iranian diplomat, and Hamid Nouri was ex-Iranian official. For the sake of national security, for the sake of safety and security of people, I am advising you, I am telling you, I don't know who is advising this government about Iran. Whatever you are hearing probably is not accurate. That I think Australian government is so relaxed. We are not hearing from Prime Minister at all. Just I'm happy to provide, massive amount of visual evidences, textual evidences. You see, they are real terrorists. They are friend of Al-Qaeda. One of the Al-Qaeda's leader was living in Iran. They are friend of Hezbollah, Lebanon Hezbollah. They are friend of Taliban. Yeah, just remind me. Whoever is involved with terrorism, they are defending them.
So, Stephen, a direct response, not to me, but to Saba.
And imagine thousands of people were protesting in Sydney and other cities, and there is a potential risk. Iranian government demonstrated they are murderer. They have no mercy to kill children. They use whatever they can to hold their power. They killed their children. They executed all the opposition and dissidents. And if something happened, the West cannot say, oh, it is a shocking incident, because they have historical terrorist attacks.
Let's hear from Stephen.
Couple of things. Firstly, thank you, and again, I'm very sorry to hear what's happening to you and your countrymen and your family. Been in government 3 months, and we are working through all of these backlogs of issues, whether it's in international relations issues or locally.
You know how many more people should be killed until the West come to the conclusion that all the Iranian diplomats must be deported and disparaged.
Yep. We have to go through these. We have to ensure that any steps that we take in these areas, they're big steps for us to take as a country. We've got to do it in a way that is methodical, and a way that looks at all the evidence and looks at all the consequences of this.
What are the methods?
So these are things that we have to look at. We're not going to rush into it and ensure that when we take steps such as the ones that you're suggesting...
How long does it take to take the steps?
Well, this is not my portfolio. This is other members of the government who will look at this, and I know they are looking at this, but... we need to ensure that when we take these steps, and I'm not disagreeing with any of your
it is the way of
propositions.
My talking, I'm using my hands a lot.
Well, you're very passionate about it. But Stephen, one thing you can do, Arezu is sitting here now, and she spoke about being in detention. She spoke about being in limbo. She spoke about her child not having a home in the world and not being able to go back to Iran. Can you look at her now and say that you are going to take up Arezu's case?
10 years I'm waiting to be able to do my PhD in Australia.
Are you going to take up that case?
I was at my
personally?
30, now I'm 40. I am still waiting to do my PhD in Australia, and hopefully one day I can do that.
I'm not sure...
Can I interrupt you before you respond? Sorry. I think
I'm sure you can and will.
Senator Penny Wong, in a beautiful statement, she said, in the last paragraph of her tweet in the Twitter, she said, which is so good, I am so thankful to her, to express her solidarity, but we need her and the government back up this claim with their support. In the last sentence, she said, Australia is going to continue support women and girls of Iran, and she is one of them.
And you can be assured that the Australian government will act in accordance with the values. I'll get to that. I will get to that. I just want to respond here. You can be assured that the Australian government will act in accordance with the values that have been expressed by Penny, as we have in other places around the world. We'll seek to do it through our multilateral fora, that is working in combination with other countries around the world, so that we are not just working one out, but working in combination with other countries around the world, so that whatever we do has the most powerful and forceful effect. Now, to your question, I'm not exactly sure about what type of visa you're on. I suspect
temporary visa, but
temporary
many
visa
of the people like me, like she, her visa is expired. She's quite sick.
Yes.
And she doesn't even have Medicare. And I am one of the best, actually. But I know lots of people, refugees, people in Australia. All of them, they are suffering in this country. And we are still feeling we are detainee in a bigger island.
Is that something that you can commit to tonight, to take this back and Australia to expedite support?
We are looking very closely at the people who are here on temporary protection visas. We've been in government for 3 months, so looking at all of the people here on temporary protection visas, you've basically had a sword hanging over your head for far too long. In your case, 10 years. We want to see how we can regularise the arrangements so that you can participate fully in Australian society, and you have no doubt
Is there any time frame?
A lot to offer. Well, I can't answer the specifics of your case on national television tonight. It sits outside my portfolio, but I know that we are committed to ensuring that we can regularise the situation on people on temporary protection visas so that you aren't living in limbo.
I am a born-again Christian. I love gay people, I love transgender, I love everyone. Am I likely to lose my job? Or more importantly, am I likely to be asked to leave my church?
Tim?
Well, there certainly has been a wind-up that happened by the Murdoch Press Herald-Sun in Melbourne that has led to...
After the Essendon case, of course, where the CEO had to step down or chose his church over remaining in his job.
So the Herald-Sun ran the story of the pastor's sermon 13 years ago, bits of which he's apologised for and which I don't think was a good sermon. Pointed out that Andrew Thorburn, just appointed CEO, was a member of that church. He was a chair on the parish council of the church. And the AFL and everyone said, right decision, diversity, inclusion. Then the Herald-Sun went and said to the church leaders, you can't now, with people of faith, you know, be sure of a job. And the front page of the Herald-Sun then was Holy War. Dan Andrews, a Catholic, against his own Catholic Archbishop. Dan working out that 20% of voters in the election in 4 weeks' time are Catholic. So he said, oh, I take my faith very seriously and every day it guides what I do. What's sad to me about that was the wind-up that happened meant that the social media posse all jumped. Instead of pushing the pause button, particularly the culture warriors on both sides, most of us are just in the exhausted middle. Most of us are just saying, hang on, it's a bit more complex, take time, think this out. Now, to your question, I believe God loves diversity. He sure made a lot of it. I believe that homophobia is a sin, but I also totally understand that whether it's Christian or religious Jew or Muslim scriptures, absolutely the belief of how we flourish is that sexuality flourishes best within a marriage between a man and woman. And I think Andrew Thorburn can hold those views and still do the job at Essendon. I think it was a rush to judgment.
That's the issue, though. When those views clash and Essendon holds different views to the church that Andrew Thorburn leads, Peter, do you fear that you'd be made to make these choices? Is that what you're saying?
I'm afraid that those choices might be made for me in my job, that if somebody finds out that the church that I'm at, did some things in a sermon, say 8 years ago, and then I get tarred with the same brush in the same way.
Saba, can I bring you in here? Because we were talking before about Iran. Sarah stood up and she said she could be killed for the way that she looks because she is violating an instruction from a theocracy in Iran. In Australia, how do we decide where that line is between religious freedom and expression of that and the rights of others to be free from the expression of religious freedom?
Yeah, as a person who grew up under religious dictatorship, my mind, my bed, my life, my choice has been seized by another person. It has been considered another person's entitlement. I would support any individual person's choice, but as an individual belief, it becomes problematic when they have the power to gather together to make a group, or as a, just impose as a law. The personal belief can be expanded and become law.
Erin Brockovich, you have a Bill of Rights in the United States. Is it sufficient to mediate these types of disputes? Because, of course, you live in a country, we are, where there's separation between church and state, a secular society, but also a very religious society as well. So how does a Bill of Rights work in mediating these things?
Well, I had an interesting situation happen in Australia a few years ago where there was an environmental injustice. There was something happening, and I was watching people who were standing there watching, and I'm thinking to myself, why are you not saying something or doing anything? And the response back was, well, we don't have a Bill of Rights. And I'm like, oh, yeah, well, maybe you want to get busy doing that. So my response would be that I think a Bill of Rights is...
I disagree.
Yeah, pardon me?
A hard disagree. And, sorry, I'll let you finish. Oh, yeah.
No, that's really kind of, it was that moment that happened for me when we were talking about the Bill of Rights in Australia that I'm like, oh my gosh, you don't have a Bill of Rights.
Why don't we, Stephen? And why do you disagree?
Because a Bill of Rights, if you look at the history of Bills of Rights around the world, they enshrine the things that a country is obsessed about at the point in time when the Bill of Rights is constructed. So in the United States, for example, they just fought a war of independence against the British. The right to bear arms was considered at that point in time to be absolutely essential to the citizenship rights. I'm sure if we fast forwarded 200 years and looked at the state of gun ownership in the United States today, we wouldn't think that was the thing that we wanted to enshrine in our Constitution. And in Australia today, I think we could make the same sorts of observations. They're about what you're obsessed with. I actually think democracy and Parliament should be the place where we are making these sorts of decisions. I could just make one point up there, I actually don't think you should be in fear for your job, sir, because of your religious beliefs, and I don't think somebody should be in fear of their job because of their sexuality or their sexual orientation either. I don't want to live in a country where that happens.
Perin, where do you sit on this issue of a Bill of Rights? Would it impede the sovereignty of the Parliament to make laws?
Yeah, I actually in fierce agreement with Stephen on that point, because I think we have inherent freedoms in Australia, and we've got certain of those are included in the Constitution, and Section 116 covers the freedom of religion to some extent. It's been considered variously over the years through high courts. But the one thing that we all think we shouldn't need anti-discrimination acts. We should not need an act that bans discrimination based on sexuality, gender, race, or age. And we do. And we shouldn't need an act to allow freedom of religious expression. And yet what we are finding is it's likely that we actually do. But as Stephen said, something drafted by Parliament that can be amended over time, fit for purpose. We did try to bring it in. It didn't pass for many reasons. At the time, the Labor Party said that if they were elected, they would deal with it. So I hope they do, and I look forward to reading the legislation that they bring forward.
Do you or would you get any bilateral support to shut down the current scourge of online betting and the waste of national resources and problem gambling, especially affecting vulnerable young men?
Thank you. I do support a Bill of Rights. I fiercely disagree with politicians, but you can fiercely disagree and still love people. I love my brother. I don't know if he loves me, but
Peter,
I love my brother.
Former treasurer.
When we come to gambling, Erin, gambling in this country is what the NRA is in America, in terms of its dominance, its capture of regulators, of both sides of politics. This is extraordinary. We have the greatest gambling losses of any nation in the world, 40% higher than the nation that comes second. And why is it that way? Because we have 75% of all the world's pokies in pubs and clubs. 75%. Most pokies are in casinos, they're destination gambling, you plan to go there. When it comes to sports betting, it's the same story now. We have 743 ads on free-to-air TV each day, sports betting ads. Britain, UK has 11 a week. We have 743 a day. Italy, Spain have banned them.
I think it's one every 2 minutes, I think, from what I understand.
Sorry?
One every 2 minutes, I
One every 2 minutes. We had the Sportsbet Brownlow, the Sportsbet Grand Final. It's why the AFL virtue signalling on the Andrew Thorburn one gets under my skin a bit, because they can do $4.5 billion for TV rights because they're going to sell far more sports bets, grooming our kids. So this last time I was on Q&A, I was on with a former Liberal senator, and I said we need a gambling royal commission. He threw up his arms. Tim always wants royal commissions. That's ridiculous. Nothing wrong with the industry. Well, we've now had royal commissions from Perth to Melbourne to Sydney to Queensland. What did we find? Inter-casinos enabling organised crime, selling drugs and cleaning it to our kids. Will I get support? Only if people continue to speak up and say enough. Why should a 10-year-old now know the logo, jingle, odds of sports betting ads, which are an adult product? And they've never watched AFL, NRL without thinking it's associated with sports betting. So thank you for asking the question.
And I'm sure our politicians can take that one on notice. Perin, Davey, Stephen Jones, Tim Costello, Saba Vasefi and Erin Brockovich. Thank you to those of you here and at home for driving the conversation. We're in Melbourne next week. Joining me to answer your questions there, Climate Change Minister Chris Bowen, economist Ross Garnaut and student activist Anjali Sharma, who's taken federal court action in the battle for a better future. Go to our website. You can register there to be in the audience and be part of that conversation as well. Thank you all again for tonight, and thanks to our panel. Good night.